two, three. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Oh, it's root for the Cubbies. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Hey!
This is the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 15th of January, 2017. Happy birthday to Dr. King today as we bring you this particular program. Also, we did on Sunday the King Day 2018 broadcast. We invite you to tune into it. And as we move along here with this presentation, we have Numbers Man coming up, also from WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network. What we'll do today, we'll start around Trump's statement that he's not a racist. We'll get to that. And an article here on denial. Denial, of course, being a psychological term. We'll also get to that. But we'll start out with Jeff Flake. He is a retiring senator from Arizona. And there's an interesting comparison here, but we need to clean this up a bit for historical purposes. Jeff Flick compares Trump's comments, his attack on the media, to that of Joseph Stalin. Stalin was the head of the Soviet Union, and I happen to be a Stalin scholar. Nonetheless, comparing the two are not comparisons at all, because you're talking about different systems. Stalin was talking about the press as public enemies because it was the bourgeois press. Now understand, there is a difference in the press. Now what DJ Trump is talking about is primarily corporate press. Now we have people like the public information service here. We use their articles, but they are a people's press. But this is not what DJ Trump is talking about. He's talking about the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Post, of course, owned by Amazon, known as the Amazon Post, and various others, the UPI and the major television networks, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, etc. That is what he's referring to as enemies of the people. But that comes not from Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong, but it comes from Goebbels, the propagandist for Schicken Group, otherwise known as Hitler. They use the word Lupenpresse. So it's basically the dirty press, the German phrase there. So let's straighten this up a little bit. But he's planning to give a speech where he's comparing these people. He's, of course, a retired Senator Flake. Self-described fake news. Trump announced the winner of his self-delivered speech Wednesday before Trump announces his winner of the his self-described fake news awards. Trump announced via Twitter he will be handing out awards Wednesday to news outlets he thinks that unfairly covered him. Flake continues to be one of the most frequent critics of DJ Trump. In recent days, he's among lawmakers who denounced Trump for describing certain African nations and Haiti as asshole countries during an Oval Office meeting. Flake had been negotiating a bipartisan deal on immigration with Senator Durbin of Illinois, Senator Graham of South Carolina. Interview on the Post Friday, he said that he was not at the meeting, but he heard about Trump's comments before it went public. These things usually circle around the rumor mill. I'm not surprised that this sentiment expressed is consistent with what he said, but that he would do that knowing the theory it would cause. He added he plans to use his upcoming speech to denounce Trump, calling the news media the enemy of the American people last year. In excerpts provided by his office, he blasted Trump on relentlessly daily assault on constitutionally protected free press. And he will call it as unprecedented as it is unwarranted. It is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infinitely spoke by Stalin to describe his enemies. Flake will say, according to the excerpts, it bears nothing that is so fraught with malice was the phrase enemy of the people that Nikita Khrushchev. Now, Khrushchev succeeded the chairman of Stalin, forbidden the use of it, telling the Soviet Communist Party that the phrase had been introduced by Stalin for the purpose of annihilating such individuals who disagreed with the supreme leader. Flake will add that Trump has it precisely backwards. Despotism, is the enemy of the people. The free press is the despot's enemy, which makes the free press a guardian of democracy. When a figure in a power reflectively calls any press that doesn't suit him a fake news, it is that press who should be the figure of suspicion, that person, and not the press. On MSNBC, Flake said that in addition to Stalin, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, also referred to the media as the enemy of the people. He was talking about the bourgeois press here, and he repeated the point that Khrushchev later forbid the use of the term. I don't think that we should be using the phrase that has been rejected by the Soviet Union, Flake said on Kaiser Dock, I'm not sure, D.C. Anyway, Flake was elected to the Senate in 2012 and announced last year he did not seek re-election. Republican contestants to succeed him includes the Joe Apollo, the former sheriff who lost for re-election there, Martha McSally, and a former state Senator Keely Ward, otherwise known as Chemtrail Ward. The expected winner is to face Kristen Sinema in the general election. Senator Flake has not endorsed any particular candidate. Here's excerpts here. 2017 was a year in which saw the truth, objective empirical evidence based on truth, more battered and abused than any other in the history of our country, at the hands of the most powerful figure in our country. It was a great year which saw the White House enshrine alternative facts into the American lexicon as justification for what used to be known as simply as old-fashioned falsehoods, lies, in other words. It was a year in which the unrelenting daily assault on the constitutionally protected free press was launched by that same White House, an assault that is unprecedented as unwarranted. The enemy of people was what the President of the United States called the free press in 2017. Mr. President, it is a testament to the condition of our democracy that our own president uses words infamously spoken by Joseph Stalin to describe his enemies. It bears nothing so fraught with malice was the phrase enemies of the people that even the Chairman Khrushchev forbid its use, telling the Soviet Communist Party that the phrase had been introduced by Stalin for the purpose of annihilating such individuals who disagreed with the supreme leader. I dare say that anyone who has the privilege and the awesome responsibility to serve in this chamber knows that these reflective slurs of flake news, are dubious at best. Those of us who travel overseas, especially the war zones and other troubled areas around the globe, encounter members of U.S.-based media who risk their lives and sometimes lose their lives reporting on the truth. To dismiss their work as fake news is an affront to the commitment and their sacrifices. Mr. President, a new report from the Committee to Protect Journalists documents that the number of journalists imprisoned around the world has reached 262, which is a new record. This total includes 21 reporters who are being held on fake news charges or false news charges. So in this words, this sets it up, the whole atmosphere surrounding DJ Trump. When you start getting into an issue of what is fake and what is not fake, then there is proof. But what DJ Trump has done is come up with alternative facts. Well, the alternative facts are nothing more than lies. And in political campaigns, you can run ads that give different point of views, usually called oppositional ads. But the problem there is to distinguish between the candidates. And the problem, many of these are just rhetoric. In other words, they are based upon nothing but quicksand. And you can get away with that usually if you run, as Goebbels said, the big lie. If you tell a lie, tell a big lie. But the big lie in the day of social media is exposed. So this leaves Trump with literally a bale of lies, as LBJ would say. And these lies are based upon one lie after one lie. So who believes Trump's facts? Primarily Trump and his followers. So in other words, you're presenting that, and you present yourself as a laughing stock of the world, literally. Because what you have done is presented to the world things that are not even facts, like denying the climate change. That plays to a certain audience. And that's what Trump is playing to, that audience of about 35, 38%, and trying to hold on to that audience. But beyond that audience, he's not doing very well. We had a poll last night from the international business people talking about Trump and where the economy is and where Trump is. In their poll, he went from roughly 35% to 40%. But that's only a temporary situation. He is up and down. The economy right now is moving along. But there are caveats to the economy, such as the number of unemployed at 4.1 now, when it goes down to, say, 3.5. Now, that's just a figure. But what that means is the slack is coming more and more out of the economy, and then it becomes regionally and locally based. There are areas now where workers just simply are not available, and they've not been available for the last 2 years. So those things impede on productivity and development. There was in the Post article we had last night, or perhaps it was on the week that was, where we talked about a trucking company, I believe in Jacksonville, Florida, that this person could expand his trucking company by 10% if he could find the drivers. He hasn't found them. But now there will be adjustments to the workforce as robotics come in to it, particularly in the driving sector. So those are some things to look out there. And also at the same time, inflation is moving up. That will affect gasoline or petrol prices. So that will ultimately, depending on where the spring driving season is, that will affect DJ Trump, because he promised, quote-unquote, cheap gas. Well, you won't have cheap gas, nor will you have cheap foodstuffs. And those are the things that hurt ordinary people the most. So those are some landmines appearing there. And also at the same time, the supposed tax cuts will not turn out to be what they claim they will be. And you have the budget there coming up. You're talking about the deficit. Will there be a deal or will there not be a deal around the Dreamers? There is no positive steps at this point. There is going to be a deal. There could possibly be some type of deal, but the Republicans are pretty much dug in on what they think. So we'll, no doubt, in later broadcasts settle that particular problem. But Senator Flake is doing a public service here, although he's a little bit off in his terminology, but again, in the American lexicon, that is okay. But in the past, we've had all kinds of quote-unquote news stories from monopoly media that were fake news. But what Trump is talking about is that the monopoly media is reporting his flaws. And, of course, Trump came up with this S-hole country thing, and that fubbin knocks him down in the eyes of some. Now, in the eyes of his supporters, it doesn't hurt him at all. We've not seen any polling in our model, the Ouija board model, or our slide rule model, that has hurt Trump with his base. Now, there in the slide rule model in Alabama, there was some erosion. People that had supported Trump in the past moved on to Wimpy Jones, as Trump called him, or actually Judge Moore. Judge Moore rode off into the sunset. But the problem is a little bit more than that. We have Ms. Love out of Utah. She is an African American from Haitian background. She has denounced the leader of her own party. So, in other words, there are situations coming there, and let's get to the fear of the new alarm with Republicans that Democrats could win big. Don't put a lot into this. Some of this is propaganda. Rap of retirements, no doubt about that. People are running for the woods, and when people run for the woods, there is a reason for that. The concern has grown so acute that Trump received what one congressional aide described as a sobering slide presentation about the difficult midterm landscape. That was at Camp David when they had a little meeting there. But the trend has continued, perhaps worsened since that briefing. Two more prominent Republican House members announced plans to retire from vulnerable seats, and a most recruited bigging off of a Senate challenge to Heidi Kent. She's in North Dakota. By the end of the week, many Republicans were scrambling to distance themselves from the president's latest comments. This is Meaner Love out of Utah, a rising star. She's probably a shooting star. Faces a strong Democratic challenge this year. Quickly denounced Trump degrading of Haiti. That's the birthplace of both of her parents. The president must apologize to both the American people and the nations he so wantonly maligned. She demanded, creating a model perhaps for Republicans in competitive districts to try to separate themselves as a survival strategy. That's interesting when you use the word survival strategy. Not going to do very much good at all, because the problem is, if these were just remarks by DJ Trump, it would be one thing. But it's based upon the Republican Party's outreach and their stratagem since 1968. That Patrick Buchanan put that in place. They had the Southern strategy, and this just plays into it. It's just an extension of it. McCarthy outlined the trends over recent decades for parties in power and spotlighted vulnerable Republican seats where Hillary Clinton won. 8 years ago, before the 2010 midterm, swept the Republicans to power. He had drafted a similar presentation with the opposite message for his party. Republicans hold the advantage of a historically favorable election map with more House seats than ever, benefiting from Republican-friendly redistricting. No doubt about that. We call it gerrymandering. The Senate landscape put 26 Democratic seats in play, including 10 in states that Trump won in 2016, and only 8 Republican seats. But other indicators are clearly flashing warning signs. Democrats have benefited from significant recruits, at least a half dozen former Army Rangers and Navy SEALs running the Democrats this year. At least 29 House seats held by Republicans will open in November following the announcement of retirements. A great number there are retiring. The president's approval race, a traditional harbinger of his party's midterm performance, is at record lows. That's according to Gallup. Gallup has been on this, and I would encourage you to look to that particular poll as far as consistency. When the wave comes, it's always underestimating the polls that conservative strategists who met with Republican candidates. The reason is that Republicans are ducking for cover. The onslaught of amidst the onslaught, Republicans strategists say they will continue to pin their party's electoral hopes on the economy. And this is what we talked about. The economy is the only ball game that they can play. But part of the problem here, again, when you start getting into lower and lower unemployment numbers of the unemployed people out there, and it is further complicated by a number of factors. First of all, you have the baby boomers that are retiring. Those job slots are either not being replaced or in many instances they're having a very hard time finding people. That is something that is a 1 or 2 year out project. And also at the same time, you have mergers that are displacing people, in other words, making people redundant, as what happened recently with Walmart and Sam's Club. Sam's Club was made after Sam Walden. But those closures there created thousands of redundancies, not certain of the entire number. But you're going to see more and more of that, particularly in the retail sector. About now, the end of this month or start of February, you'll see more stores closing. Those are the Macy's, the Sears, etc., across there. And you're seeing in the restaurant business more and more restaurants are closing because they can't find the staff or other kinds of things there. In other words, they're oversaturated. And then, of course, you have the consumer, about 70% of the economy, that over the holiday season, many consumers either dipped into savings or used plastic. That will impact the economy in Q1, which we're in right now. And then you have Q2 and Q3. So in other words, you have a long ways to go here, and we've seen some numbers drop, and they're going to see more drops, more rises, but more drops probably than rises according to our seesaw model. We're getting to this, but it takes a little while. Things are pretty rocky right now, so we won't get into that part. The silver of optimism extends to the top of Republican leadership, who are hopeful that Trump's desperate efforts on the political landscape can once again surprise the nation this fall. Well, who knows what 2018 will be like? Nobody can call 2016 right. That's Johnny Cornyn. He's from Texas. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to get elected and that Chuck Schumer was going to be the majority leader. Well, the problem there was you weren't going to turn enough seats there because you don't have the landscape you have today. Trump worked hard to recruit two candidates there. Kevin Creamer, he's a Republican in North Dakota, and the incumbent Warren Hatch. Warren Hatch is long gone. So those are things that are changing the landscape. And down in Florida, they are pushing Governor Scott to run against Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson has been around for a very, very long time. So there are options there. Likelihood he will do it. That's why they exempted Florida from drilling off the coast there. And in Ohio, as Josh Mandel also made a surprise announcement on the 5th that he would abandon his own Senate campaign, which had broad national support because of his wife's health. The White House operation helped to push James Riconcetti, who has launched an outside bid for governor to challenge. Has launched an outside bid for governor to instead challenge Sherrod Brown. That's the senator there in Ohio. So in Ohio, they're having some machinations going on in states that he assumes he's in good shape in. That's West Virginia, Montana. Not as good a shape as he thinks he is in Montana. And in North Dakota. Still, two people with direct knowledge of that relationship said it has improved considerably in recent months. One person said to professionalize the operation. There's tension between the White House and National. I would discount that. The National Senatorial Electoral Committee there, familiar with the operation, said there's a noticeable fundraising uptick in December when Republicans passed their tax bill. Well, that was a giveaway to the corporations, but how does that play on Main Street? A lot of it's going to depend on how much money Main Street gets out of the deal. The race had been larger than life. The White House became because officials wanted to stem the tide of losses suffered in Virginia and in Alabama. Well, Virginia and Alabama are different states from North Dakota, no doubt about that, despite all the political handicappers who gradually increase the odds that Democrats will retake the House when they need to pick up 24 seats. Well, difficult to estimate that. Darrell Issa, he's gone. The auto alarm king is gone. Royce is gone in California, but that's not unusual. Recruitment in Tennessee of former governor there, Phil Breslin, to run for the Senate, left open by Bob Coker. They tried to recruit the current governor there, Bill Haslam, but it fell short. One prominent donor, rumors that a former Minnesota governor would jump into the race. That's Tim Hu. He told me unequivocally he is not going to run for the Senate. So no Tim Hu there. This Republican situation is much more intense, and it's much more intense as you go along. What we're seeing now is an artificial situation going on with DJ Trump. One, you have like Rasmussen that has him consistently at 42 to 45%. That does reflect on the Real Clear Politics average. But by and large, if you look at Gallup, who has done it over the months of his presidency, he's a 35% operator, and that's basically where he is. And what is happening is he is alienating more and more parts there, because in places like Florida, he was able to bamboozle some Latinos and primarily Cubans and some others and some Haitians into actually voting for him. But that will not be now. That whole scenario has a change that goes all the way out to Utah with Meyer Love. Anyway, Dave Hansen, a political advisor to Love, said such conflicts are unavoidable during the Trump administration. Well, the problem there is that these conflicts are now coming up with the book Their Fire and Fury. It's starting to hit home to some of these Republicans. That is why they are frantic to try to get their agenda done. Now, Ryan would like to go to social programs. In our opinion, that would be a gift to the Democratic Party if he does go to Medicare and Medicaid, because then there are more substantive issues to run on in an issue-oriented campaign. So the Democrats are already getting these SEALs together, Army Rangers together. They've got the military option going there. And Trump is stuck trying to stick himself in Syria where he shouldn't be. He's not getting anything done in Afghanistan. There are more killings there every day. So in other words, that map is not looking good for DJ Trump. Then you have the false alarm out in Hawaii. We're certainly not running with Ronald Reagan for sure. This is Hansen. What a candidate has to do in a situation like this is you can't be all in for the guy. Basically, you support him. Well, that's a big problem there. You can't run a schizophrenic situation there. Who is up next? Corey Lewinsky is going to testify, said in an interview broadcast Sunday to the House committee probing the Russian election. We don't put much into that. Said on WABC AM, that's in New York, he expects to appear before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on Wednesday to discuss the campaign. He told the host, Rita Cosby, he had not been contacted, he said, by the special prosecutor. I will be fully prepared to answer any question about my tenure at the Trump campaign. I did not collude or cooperate or coordinate with any Russian agency, Russian government, anyone else to try to impact this election. I'm happy to come out and set the record straight, effectively what he said. And Lewinsky, what else he said? He's promoting a book he co-authored about the campaign, Let Trump Be Trump. So he's got a book scheme going too. I would say, listen to your attorneys. Lewinsky said, "There's no question to me if he just sat down and tell the team exactly what took place. I was there, and it will come across the same conclusion that everybody else has already come to, which is there was no collusion." That's going to be a very hard sell to present to people, because people, being people, are looking at this. I was just looking at the Washington Post here. Democracy dies in the darkness. There's no doubt about that. It does indeed stop in the darkness here. But these are issues. Remember, now we're in January. So you have a long ways to go, and it's too early now to set. But what we do have is a retirement. So we do have some movement. In other words, people are retiring. You look at those seats. No two elections are the same. As in Utah, you have Willard Romney running or going to run for the seat. And Utah is changing, particularly the Salt Lake City area. So you just can't go out there and say, well, okay, this is what we are going to do here in Utah. And what happens in a lot of conservative areas, we look at Texas, for instance, moving a little slowly, but in Utah, the types of Republicans that have been elected there, particularly when we look at what happened to Ms. Waddles out there, that was a nurse that was terrorized by a police officer there that is no longer one that's not with the Salt Lake City Police Department. No one went out there. Let me go to e-jdionnejr. We had one of his. We could be a much better country. Trump makes it impossible here. Political leaders in democracies have a few core objections. They are charged with solving today's problems and preparing their nation for the future. They are responsible for creating some sense of shared purpose and mutual respect amongst their citizens. Above all, a common commitment to preserving the very freedom on which the democracy depends. Within this context, citizens exercise their right to argue about how to define the public interest, how to identify the central problems, how to choose among competing values. Given my social democratic leanings, I would assess, for example, that equal opportunity includes the opportunity to fully participate in self-government, demands a far greater degree of economic security and equality than we currently enjoy. This is particularly true when it comes to access to health care, education, family time away from for paid labor, and a chance to accumulate wealth. You might push back and say that my proposals towards these ends impugn more on them individual freedoms and require a higher degree of taxation than you're willing to put up with. Or you might insist that I am forcing too much on the economy and promoting a better personal value societal-wide is more conducive to a nation's well-being than any of my programs for greater equality. And yes, we might quarrel about who has a right to join our political community because become a part of our nation. We should not pretend that our current battle about immigrants are unique to our times. In the U.S., we have been wrangling over immigration since at least the 1840s. I suspect, and may God preserve our republic, we will be having at least some contention around this subject in 2140 as well. 2140s. Such debate can be bitter, but democracy help depends upon our ability to hold our passions against each other in check and to offer others at least some benefit of doubt. The political science, Steve Levitsky and David Zebot emphasized in their timely new book, How Democracy Dies. Democracy requires mutual toleration. That is the understanding that competing parties accept one another as legitimate rivals, and forbearance, which means that politicians exercise restraint in deploying their institutional prerogatives, which alias brings us yet again to DJ Trump, who, no matter how much we want to, cannot be avoided at the moment because he threatens the conditions under which democracy can flourish. This is along with what Senator Flake said. Our current debate is frustrating, not only because Trump doesn't understand what mutual toleration and forbearance even mean. That's not correct. Trump does understand what mutual toleration is and forbearance. It's just that given Trump's political leanings, and you have to go right back to the political philosophy that DJ Trump encompasses, a right-of-center philosophy, a libertarian philosophy, and a white supremacist philosophy, all rolled up into one neat rollable cigarette, so to speak, or cigar, what do you want to say? I suppose you could also go for the, vapor cigarettes. Anyway, and while Trump enablers in the Republican Party will do all they can to avoid these issues, there should now be no doubt, if it was clear long ago, that we have a brutal racist as our president. Now, at least DJ Dion has just said a brutal racist. His reference to immigrants as asshole countries, his expressed preference for Norwegians over Haitians, Salvadorans, and new arrivals from Africa make it abundantly clear. Racist leaders did not help us reach mutual toleration. His semi-denial 15 hours after the comments were made. Well, but notice what Trump's outbursts did to our capacity to govern ourselves and make progress. Democrats and Republicans, sympathetic to the plight of the Dreamers, worked out an immigration compromise designed carefully to give Trump what he has said he needed. These were concessions by Democrats on board a security chain immigration based on a family reunification and the diversity lottery that Trump has criticized. GOP senators such as Graham and Flake bargained in good faith and were given ample reason by Trump to think they had hit the quote-unquote sweet pot. Trump blew them away with his torrent of bigotry, and in the process he shifted the almond for avoiding a government shutdown squarely on the shoulders and on his own shoulders and those of the Republican leaders who are shamefully slow in condemning the president's racism. So, in other words, the illness is there. There are many issues, both more important and more interesting than the psyche of a deeply damaged man. We are capable of being a far better nation. We need leaders who call us to our obligations and to others as free citizens. Instead, we have a president who knows only how to foster division and hate. Well, you have to understand that this division and hate is not the product of G.J. Trump. It is a product that went from 1968, 1948 with Strom Thurmond, from the legacy of slavery within the nation, from the legacy of apartheid within the nation. Trump is only coming up with the 2018 version, let's just say that we have. And on this King Day, we need to remember what is actually going on here and who is responsible. It falls squarely on not DJ Trump, but on the Republican leadership, because they have the power. They have the membership in the House, which could bring articles of impeachment if they wanted to and pass them. They have the Senate. So they're the ones that control the fate of DJ Trump and DJ Trump's programs. But what DJ Trump has done, such as the tax sham, he's adopted their programs. And basically this whole scheme that he's talking about here has been what the Republicans have been talking about for a long time. People like Senator McCain wanted to come to some sort of sensible agreement on immigration. That has been for years. They abandoned that to be opportunistic and decided that during the 2008 campaign against Barack Obama, they took a page out of Hillary Clinton's racist book and ran the most racist campaign in history, except for that primary. And when Willard Romney came back, it was basically the same old scheme. They just could not get enough voters out, and the suppression program wasn't going right, so Barack Obama is reelected. But Trump was there with his birthers campaign against Barack Obama, and at the same time, when that phased out, he went to the transcripts. But remember, he built up this base and excited this base within the base of the Republican Party. This is, as the late, great Jerry Pippin used to say, which we dedicate this program today, incidentally. On King Day, he was able to get that 37% going there. That's usually where they are operating. They usually start out with about 37% of the electorate, and running against a flawed candidate like Hillary Clinton in a very close election in some states. Now, they were able to use the rural vote in Pennsylvania because of voter suppression in Pennsylvania, because followers of O.J. Simpson, young African Americans, etc., did not vote for either of those candidates. The same thing in Wisconsin. You saw the same situation turn out in Milwaukee. They knew the gangster would win Wisconsin, but they could deal with the gangster. That's DJ Trump, incidentally, shorthand there. So those are two states, and also you go into Michigan, the same old cookie cutter, and the Clinton campaign of abandonment of the working class. So in other words, you had all of this going on. So don't get too much into this Russian interference scheme there. There was a lot of interference going on. There was voter suppression. That was the number one thing. That's the Republicans. There was misinformation, fake news put out by the Republicans and the DJ Trump shop. Those were the things that motivated people and build this mythical wall. They didn't need any wall. Most of the immigrants now fly into the country. But now you're still pushing that scenario on the color of people's skin. You had the Muslim situation banning there, but that was playing the little black Sambo game, I call it. And that was what it was all about. Nothing unusual there. Later today, from state to state, this is in Madison, Wisconsin, you'll have a King Day, music awards and speeches at the Rotunda in Madison, Wisconsin. That is coming from the Public News Service. And Martin Luther King branch of the Milwaukee Public Library will hold a full day of activities. That is in Wisconsin. While the nation has made progress in an attempt to achieve racial equality, the president and CEO of the Urban League of Madison, who is he, Mr. Ruben Anthony, said there are troubling signs that the nation may be sliding backwards in achieving that goal. Well, there's no doubt about that. It has, we'll use the past tense, it has slid. There's also a very good article here. This is from the Saturday Review. The heartbeat of racism is denial. This is by Kendi. I'm not sure who Kendi is. Doesn't matter that much. It was written on the 13th of January. When our reality is too ugly, we deny reality. It is too painful to look at. Reality is too hard to accept. Mental health experts, this is what we alluded to earlier, routinely say that denial is amongst the most common defensive mechanisms. Denial is how a person defends his superior sense of self and her racially unequal society. Denial is how America defends itself as a superior to the S-hole countries in Africa and elsewhere, as DJ Trump said in a meeting, although he has since denied that it is also how America defends itself as superior to those developing countries in Africa, to quote how liberal opponents of DJ Trump might often describe them. Basically the same scheme. Trump appears to be unifying America, unifying Americans in their denial. The more racist he sounds, the more Trump's country denies his racism, and the more his opponents look away from their own racism to brand Trump's country as racist. Through it all, America remains as a unified country of denial. The reckoning of Trump's racism may become the reckoning of America's racism, because America's creed of denial, I'm not a racist, knows no political party, no ideology, no color, no regions. On Friday, Senator Durbin of Illinois affirmed that Trump used the term asshole during the meeting there. He rightfully described Trump's words as hate-filled, vile, racist, and added, I cannot believe that in the history of the White House, in that Oval Office, any president ever spoke the words that I personally heard out of the president's mouth yesterday. But Trump is no exception in framing Trump's racism as exceptional and in seeking to highlight the depth of the president's crudity. Durbin, a reliable liberal senator, shows the depth of denial of American racism, beginning with 8 presidents who held slaves. That's to be then consider how Lincoln urged African people to leave the country. Even when you cease to be slaves, you are yet far removed from being placed on the equality with the white race, Lincoln told 5 African American guests at the White House in 1862. So it's better for us and better, therefore, to be separated. Raging then as we are raging now, the abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison responded, can anybody be more purulent, absurd, and illogical, and impertinent and untimely? He added that had it not been for the corporate of the white enslavers, not one of these races would be found upon the continent. One of their race. I'm sorry about that. The presidential history also includes the social Darwinism of Theodore Roosevelt, known as Teddy Roosevelt, the federal government segregation, birth of a nation, praising Woodrow Wilson. He was the father of American foreign policy. and the bigotry that came from the mouth of presidents who are generally seen as essential to racial progress. LBJ said nearly as often as the Klansman did. Some NIGGR. Well, yeah. He called Dr. King a nigger preacher. But, you see, you have to understand the rhetoric there, and LBJ, of course, is dead now. But LBJ's total work and his total contribution to the liberation of African people in America, something that DJ Trump's GOP party would like to unravel. So the big argument who the racist is, we know who the racist is. Let's not be idiots. I grew up to the beat of racist denial in Queens, not far from where Trump grew up. I was raised in the urban hell of neighborhoods he probably avoided, alongside immigrants from countries he derided. Last week, and in schools or elsewhere, we heard recitals of the American ideals of equality, expounded on the day we celebrate the life of Dr. King. These events often feature recitals of words, all men are created equal, which are written by a slaveholder who once declared that black people were inferior to white people in the endowment of both body and mind. Thomas Jefferson was not a founding father of equality. He was the founding father of a heartbeat of denial that lives through both DJ Trump's denial and the assertion that his racist views are abnormal from America, and it's a precedence. Well, it's not. But there's a difference in Lyndon Johnson passing a civil rights bill almost single-handedly and encouraging Dr. King to march and calling him a nigger. DJ Trump uses the same language, but at the same time, you look at his legislative record, you look at his executive orders, you look at the composition of his White House. Do I say any more? The Klan is at work there. He had Steve Bannon there. Steve Bannon is a modern-day Klansman, but the same old scam. And Trump, what was he calling football players, SOBs, and things of that nature. This record is more and more out here. So, yes, I agree with the article here, and I'm not sure who this individual is. Kendi is a professor of history and international relations at American University. He's the author of Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America. We'll have to get his book there. Ibram X. Kendi. We'll have to get his book and look at it when we get an opportunity here. Let's do the sports. Run a little bit over here, but on most of the channels you will get us in our entirety, the Boston Red version. On some other channels, obviously the shorter version. Anyway, let's go to the NBA from last night. The Bucks were at the Heat. Heat 97-72 for the Bucks of Milwaukee. In overtime, the Pelicans were at the Knickerbockers. Pelicans 123-118 for the Knicks. The Pacers were in Phoenix in the Sun. Pacers 122-97 for the Sun. And the Trailblazers were in cold Minnesota. Timberwolves 120-103. That's the NBA. College basketball, wasn't very much college ball going last night. North Carolina State and number 3 Virginia 68-51. We'll start giving the college basketball scores here. Won't be long before we get to spring training. Anyway, nonetheless, the Red Wings and Blackhawks. The Red Wings shut out the Blackhawks in Chicago for the zip. The Flames and Hurricanes. Flames 4-1. And the Rangers and Pelicans. Pelicans 5-2 there. Penguins. I'm sorry. Why did I say Pelicans? Well, Pelicans are a different team. Anyway, the Penguins in Pittsburgh. They're 5-2 there. I'm thinking a different sport. The Canucks and Wild. Canucks 3-2 over the Wow. They're in Minnesota. The Canucks are in Vancouver, British Columbia. These teams move around so much, it's hard sometimes to differentiate. But one more thing here. Dr. King was born on this day in 1929, and he died on April the 4th in Memphis, Tennessee, 1968. This was a legacy that Dr. King left, and we celebrate him today, but not in, I guess as you would say, an empty void, period. There was also the false alarm, we'll call it, out in Hawaii, that they sent out an alert saying they were being attacked by missiles, and it took a while for this attack to come back. Let me just tack this on because we're over time anyway, so we might as well take advantage of it if we can find it. It's called Wrong Button. This is in the Star Advertiser that is in Honolulu, Hawaii. It was 74 when this was. And the Wrong Button sent out false missile situation here. The mayor, Kurt Caldwell, issued a statement and said, today a false missile warning cannot be repeated as it caused extreme anxiety, no doubt about that, and concern for local residents and visitors, etc., and the country as a whole. Well, by the time the country found out about it, it was over. Anyway, I met with the chiefs of the city's first responders, key members of my cabinet, our departments, and acted as though the threat was real. The statement said the HPD confirmed the false warning 3 minutes after it was issued by the State Emergency Management Agency and immediately began using their bullhorns to inform the public, including Waikiki, that no threat existed. This was at 2:10 p.m. At 1:25, the governor, I suppose that's how you pronounce it, and the head of the Emergency Management Agency apologized repeatedly this afternoon for the panic-induced false alarm missile alert, scare, confusion, and angered Hawaii residents and visitors. Today is a day our community will never forget. Governor added, and that he was sorry for the bogus alert. I know firsthand how today's false alarm affects all of us here in Hawaii, and I'm sorry for the pain, confusion it caused. I'm extremely upset about this and doing everything he can. So the administrator apologized also. So in other words, you had a lot of apologies going on here. Issued the missile alert that was at the state emergency officials mistakenly issued it. That was at 8:07 a.m. Today by sending Hawaii into intense, short-lived panic and correcting the error. About 20 minutes later, the cell phone notification, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Although the state emailed the alert was a mistake at 8:25, they did not issue a cell phone correction. At 8:34, Pacific, a U.S. Pacific Command spokesman said the email saying had detected no ballistic missile threat to Hawaii. The governor said at a press conference that was late in the morning that the false alarm was caused by human error during a shift change when an employee literally, I thought this was a joke, pushed the wrong button. He said the worker was going through a process to make sure the system is working. When an error occurred, he added that the sirens would also sound if there was a real attack. He said there will be an investigation, no doubt about that. This is regrettable. It won't happen again, he said. I guess it had happened before that. This is Milani? I'm not sure. Said he also looked into why a correction wasn't sent out right away. DJ Trump was in Florida for the weekend, and the White House said in a statement the president had been briefed. He's probably asleep. Issued a statement saying, while I am thankful this morning, the alert was a false alert. He said the public must have confidence in the emergency system. No doubt. There was no missile threat. It was a false alarm. It was based on human error. That's the Senator Brian Schwartz. Anyway, a lot of apologizing going on around there. The false alarm caused problems across the island in social media there. The PGA's Tour Sony Open on Walu, I guess, at the Waikiki Country Club was largely empty, and players were still a few hours from going out there. So I guess it didn't cause a problem there. And this is basically it. And what happened? Let's see if we can. Oh, well, we didn't get the video. Anyway, you'll get the picture here. You'll see General so-and-so here, General Logan, the governor, and some other functionaries trying to explain what happened to them. This will do it for us on the Monday morning quarterback. We didn't have the talk shows up here, but there were some on the talk shows. Jeff Flake, for one, he was on there. We didn't need to do that. We got it from the Post. I think Tim Cotton Picking Cotton was on one, claiming he didn't hear the president say something. Who cares? I mean, whether you heard it or didn't hear it, you can take textual comments by DJ Trump, but he said these things before. This is sort of like Mr. Wolf's book. Many of the highlights in this tell-all National Enquirer type book have been things DJ Trump has done on the campaign trail. The latest is a 2002, I think something like 2005, where his personal lawyer arranged supposedly a payoff to an ex-porno star. Again, those kinds of things don't impact. I mean, DJ Trump's on all kinds of nefarious schemes, etc. So, in other words, that does not surprise anyone. Debauchery, he's been engaged in that forever. But nor does his racist comments. So, in other words, that's all about him. We spent too much time talking about him, as E.J. said. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you next week on the Monday morning quarterback. Incidentally, we're still boycotting the NFL. As I understand, they are getting to their league championship games now and on towards a Super Bowl, which activists are making plans now to demonstrate before the Super Bowl.